Back again with another review. Today we're going to talk about review The Mummy Complete Legacy Collection. All 6 films from the original Legacy from 1932 to 1955. The films here: The Mummy from 1932 with Boris Karloff, The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Curse, and Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. Now, before I get into the collection review, the original plan was to try and review every film and have it be its own video, but the more and more I got into this collection here, and I'm like, maybe it's not a good idea. And I'll talk about why here in a little bit. But let's talk about The Mummy, the original 1932 black and white mummy film. And the film here is directed by Karl Freund. Maybe I'm probably getting that wrong here, but the cast here, you got Boris Karloff as Imhotep, and later on in the film, he's known as Ardith Bey, because it's 10 years later in the film, and he's this kind of Egyptian character, but he's still the mummy. You have Zita Johann in the film as Helen, and you got some other people here in the cast. Now, Boris Karloff, coming off of playing Frankenstein, his presence here, the look of the mummy, I thought was good. The makeup by Jack Pierce, it's good. And Boris Karloff had that bone structure, he had the voice, he had the tone, and the first few minutes of the film is what people remember. The awakening of the mummy, and the opening of the eyes, and that shot of him laying back, and again he's waking up, and again, really it's the first 10 minutes of this movie that is the best meat on this bone here. And there's certain shots throughout the picture where you'll see like a close-up of Boris Karloff, and you'll see like his eyes glow or whatever, and again those are some standout moments. But for me overall, I would say The Mummy, Boris Karloff brings presence here as the mummy, Imhotep. Solid makeup by Jack Pierce. Eerie atmosphere, but other than that, I mean, I can't really say too much. I'll give it a little bit of respect, so I'm not gonna, give it a low grade, but for me, this is like a 5 out of 10 for me. The second one here, The Mummy's Hand. This one here, I kind of liked. I will admit. The plot real quick. You have these two out of work archaeologists, and they're in Egypt, and they discover evidence of a burial place and of this ancient princess. And you have this magician that they meet that funds the expedition, and the magician has a daughter as well, and they go out on this adventure. But when they get there, this high priest and this mummy, they begin to terrorize this group, and that's the plot to that one. I will say about this one here, so the cast real quick. The character of Steve Bannon, the main character, is played by Dick Foran. The character of Babe is played by Wallace Ford. They are the main characters here, and I thought they were a good pairing. I thought they had a little bit of a rapport here. The vibe of this one was quite different from the Boris Karloff picture. This one was a little bit more loose and fun. And for me, you can say that with The Mummy's Hand, this one's kind of more in line with the 1999 movie. And I can see where the 1999 movie kind of borrows, from the original Mummy and this movie. Where the Mummy, the first one, has more of an atmosphere, maybe a little bit more of the horror. And The Mummy's Hand here, it's more of the, kind of fun and loose entertainment. And the interaction between characters here. And you can kind of see some similarities here where you look at the 1999 movie and you look at the main character of Rick O'Connell, and you can kind of see, okay, that's the main character here. The sidekick of Babe. That's kind of like, John Hannah's character, Jonathan, the street beggar. There's a street beggar character in this movie that is kind of here and there throughout the film. You can say, that's kind of like Benny in The Mummy. So again, you can kind of see where the 1999 movie kind of takes elements from the first two of The Mummy from 1932 and this movie. And The Mummy, played by Tom Tyler, isn't bad. The one thing that I do remember is that in this one, The Mummy, when there's some like close-up shots, like the eyes are blackened, and I thought, that was a, cool effect, kind of creepy. There's some fun stuff in the third act. I mean, and this is kind of where you get into the whole thing, and this is kind of like a common thing that they would, have in these movies involving like tannin leaves and fluids. I think it's like if you burn, 3 tannin leaves, you awake the mummy, and if you burn 9 tannin leaves at midnight, the mummy is out and about, or the mummy kills. And there's a fun little bit in the third act here where the mummy's trying to get the tannin fluid, and the main character knocks it over, and it's in the crevices of the floor, and the mummy is trying to like suck it up. And I thought I got a little chuckle out of that. The mummy's on the floor, trying to get it up, like suck it up from the crevices of the concrete, and then he's set on fire, so, not a bad ending. And, for a film here, I mean, again, I thought it was a bit more loose and more fun, more of a brisk watch. And that's what I think about The Mummy's Hand. Then again, offers more fun, more of a loose take on the story, some decent interaction between the characters and a brisk pace. For me, I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. Right now we talk about The Mummy's Tomb, and this is where a lot of this for me starts to become a blur. Okay, so the plot real quick. You have a high priest that travels to America with a living mummy to kill those who had desecrated the tomb of an Egyptian princess 30 years earlier. To me, this is the worst one, because the thing that I remember from this movie here, The Mummy's Tomb, is that they bring back the two characters from the previous movie, only to kill them off. And the two characters that I liked of Steve and Babe, the actors Dick Foran and Wallace Ford, they're killed off here in this movie. And it's just a very sluggish, even for an hour long, even for this, being an hour long, it's just a very boring, sluggish, and nothing really happens. I mean, other than, it's 30 years later, and the two characters that I liked are taken out. And there's not much more I can say about this one. For me, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 10. Again, there's not much. It's just insignificant, sluggish, and the two characters that I liked are taken out. There's not much more I can say about The Mummy's Tomb. Now, to The Mummy's Curse. And this is the one that takes place in Louisiana. So the plot, real quick. Shipped to Louisiana, the mummy from Egypt roams the bayou, tormented by his forbidden love for the princess. And the thing, what I wrote down here that I remember, the actress of Kay Harden, she's beautiful. You have a little dog in here by the name of Peanut, and he's kind of that's the one thing, or the two things that I remember. But other than that, another boring entry, just another boring movie. And for me, I give this another 3 out of 10. And these are not the worst films that I've ever seen, but they're just boring, and there's not that a lot, even for an hour long. Like, I can't remember anything. Now, moving on to The Mummy's Ghost here. And I don't want to get into the plot of that one, but what stood out for me with The Mummy's Curse. John Carradine, I remember, was in this one, and he stood out for me. I like John Carradine. He has striking features. George Zucco comes back because I think he's in The Mummy's Hand. He was a character in one of the early Mummy movies. But again, this one, again, I talked about already. The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Curse. All three, I would say the worst is The Mummy's Tomb. But these movies are such a blur that, I give them each a 3 out of 10 because they're that boring, they're that sluggish, and insignificant. I mean, that's all I can say. Okay, and the last one here, Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. I like this one. It was a nice pick-me-up from the forgettable and boring Mummy movies. Abbott and Costello were a great team. And it makes me want to go out and seek other movies, like other Abbott and Costello movies, because they had a good chemistry. They have a, really fun back and forth, and, some fun bits of, physical comedy and hijinks. I would say for me, my favorite bit is with the medallion and the sandwich. And they're kind of, like trading the sandwich back and forth and, like on who would eat the sandwich. And I enjoyed that. And for me, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. I felt, again, it was a nice pick-me-up after watching, some bad Mummy films. And, I got some chuckles here and there. Abbott and Costello were a great team. So, yeah, again, a 7 out of 10 for me. But the bonus features here for this Blu-ray, you do have a documentary, I believe. It's about 30 minutes. Mummy Dearest, a horror tradition unearthed documentary. He Who Made Monsters, The Life and Art of Jack Pierce. Unraveling the Legacy of the Mummy Archives. You got a couple of commentaries. I think there's one on the original Mummy, and Rick Baker is on the commentary. So you have a few good features on here. And at the end of the day, the Mummy Legacy Collection pack here, calculating the average, I'm going to give it an overall rating of a 5 out of 10. The Mummy's Hand isn't too bad. And Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, I had some fun with. But, you have to get through some sluggish, Mummy movies to get to that point. The original Mummy, maybe I'm not a fan of, but I respect, the movie for Boris Karloff and the atmosphere, but I wasn't too big on it. So yeah, 5 out of 10 overall. But thank you for watching, and have a good day.